swear that I fell in love just by hearing her voice. That was a magical moment. That evening, I think, is when it actually happened. We fell in love. And then shortly after that, we were a couple.
For decades, ABBA fans have lived with unanswered questions about the real story behind the group's rise, heartbreak, and eventual split. Now, at 79, Bjorn Ulvaeus has finally spoken, sharing truths about Agnetha Fältskog that many never expected to hear.
Never ever thinking about forming a group. They had their own careers and we just happened to meet. We happened to fall in love like young people do. Went on vacations together and did that kind of things. And we used to sing together, only privately.
Was their picture-perfect romance really as flawless as it seemed? Or was the pain behind the music far deeper than fans imagined? From secret struggles on tour to confessions about their divorce, what Bjorn revealed strips away the glitter and exposes the raw story behind ABBA's most private battles. The illusion of a perfect couple. When ABBA first rose to fame, the love story between Bjorn Ulvaeus and Agnetha Fältskog seemed like the perfect fairy tale. Two strikingly attractive musicians, both bursting with talent, who not only fell in love, but also built one of the most successful bands in the world. Fans around the globe looked at them and saw the embodiment of everything they wished for in their own lives. Romance, success, and creative partnership rolled into one dazzling package. Their chemistry on stage was undeniable, and it appeared effortless. With every performance, Bjorn's precise songwriting and Agnetha's golden, emotive voice combined into something magical, convincing audiences that the love they sang about was real. The illusion was powerful, and the public believed in it wholeheartedly. Part of the reason the image of their relationship stuck so firmly in people's minds was that ABBA's music often reflected themes of love, longing, and intimacy. For many listeners, the lyrics felt personal, almost autobiographical. When Agnetha sang a ballad about heartbreak, or when the group delivered an upbeat anthem about the joys of romance, fans assumed it came directly from the couple's own experiences. Magazines, newspapers, and television appearances reinforced this impression, framing them as the golden couple of pop music. To the outside world, Bjorn and Agnetha represented the dream of having it all. Adoration from millions, artistic triumph, and a deep personal bond. From the outside, it was all glam, while from the inside, souls were crumbling. Something that most fans never, ever contemplated. The relationship survived under sharper tints of difference between the smiles and the perfectly staged press photos. Within the walls of ABBA, the strains were already smacking them in their early years. Traveling extensively, endless waiting on press obligations, and the heavy load of keeping global success toxic conditions on both of them. Meanwhile, fans were viewing glitter costumes and proudly synchronized dance steps pop perfection. What the couple had was exhaustion, emotional distance, and building miscommunication. The pressure on the two of them intensified when the public fed themselves to the frenzy of their relationship. They were not just satisfied with listening to the music. They were interested in every detail about the lives of Bjorn and Agnetha. Most of the tabloid stories talk of love and togetherness, while cleverly juxtaposing true and outright false details that make their lives appear so rosy. For the couple themselves, it was a strange cage of expectation. Every time they slipped in and out of the public eye, they were expected to be everything to their fans. Not just the consummate performers, but the perfect lovers, which the world expected them to be as well. This illusion of perfection hardly remained confined to public images. Instead, it crept into private lives. Agnetha, sensitive by nature, felt the gut-wrenching pressure of trying to live up to an unthinkable standard. She was loved as a pop star and envied as the wife of an ABBA songwriter. The reality was much messier. At home, Nu struggled with conflicting pressures of motherhood and fame, desperately trying to balance her children's needs against the punishing schedule of the band. Bjorn, on the other hand, had grown gloomy, placing more stress on the efficiency of their work than on the emotional side of their relationship. From ardent love, the connection was steadily drifting toward pragmatic coolness, where two souls acted fittedly for their roles rather than honoring a treasured bond. Yet for the millions who adored ABBA, these cracks were never visible to them. They would continue projecting their fantasies onto the couple, write letters, create posters, and daydream about lives as perfect as imagined for Bjorn and Agnetha. To fans, they were more than just musicians. They were mummers for love itself, and therefore, that very truth of their breakup made it worse. When the announcement of the couple's divorce arrived, it felt like the demise of far more than a marriage. It was the shattering of a dream. The fans mourned as if losing something very personal, because they had, in a way. Their story looked flawless, but one sudden decision from Bjorn shattered the dream in ways no one foresaw. The painful divorce and its fallout. When news of Bjorn Ulvaeus and Agnetha Fältskog's divorce became public, the reaction among fans was nothing short of heartbreak. To many, it felt as though the dream they had been sold for years had crumbled before their eyes. ABBA was not just a pop group, it was a story. And at the center of that story was the seemingly unshakable bond between Bjorn and Agnetha. Their separation symbolized more than just the end of a marriage. It was the first clear signal that the magic powering ABBA's success was beginning to fade. What shocked many was how abruptly the divorce seemed to arrive. Agnetha later admitted that she was blindsided by Bjorn's decision. While disagreements and tensions had existed for years, she had not expected him to walk away so suddenly. Bjorn himself confessed years later that it was his choice to leave, and that the way he went about it was cold. Rather than a long discussion or mutual conclusion, he simply announced that he was moving on. For Agnetha, this was devastating. Already struggling with the crushing demands of global fame and the responsibilities of motherhood, the sudden collapse of her marriage left her emotionally shattered. The fallout was widespread. Agnetha was getting lonelier and lonelier. She still had to smile, sing, and act on stage as if nothing had happened. Offstage, she was a young mother in a fight with loneliness and insecurity, having no marriage stability to lean on. For someone like Agnetha, by nature, sensitive and introverted, this kind of isolation could not have been anything else but unbearable. She said that this was a time of periods of depression and crushing anxiety, feelings that would only worsen as ABBA continued to perform. Every performance became a memory of her heartbreaking divorce, performed beside her ex in front of millions. The divorce further endangered the precarious foundation of ABBA. Even if they attempted to keep their professional strength, the emotional essence of the group had been shattered beyond repair. The relationship that infused their music with so much life was now souring. Songs that were once light or romantic were now tinged with melancholy and loss. Audiences could feel the difference, even if they could not articulate it. The shining pop facade of ABBA was starting to crack, the fissures revealing fatigue, sorrow, and broken relationships underneath. For Bjorn, it was a very complicated divorce. Even though it was his choice to leave, it didn't mean that he escaped unhurt. He confessed that he felt guilty about how he handled the divorce because it caused Agnetha so much pain. Instead of facing it, he often used it in his music. Writing became a form of therapy for him. He felt it was an inner outlet, that expressed feelings he could not convey personally. And this will lead to one of the most significant heartbreak songs from ABBA, leading to a track that will not only immortalize their divorce, but also deepen the emotional wounds it has left behind. The press, of course, made things worse. Newspapers all over the world took the story up on a scandal pretense or on betrayal or tragedy grounds. Headlines speculated about affairs, personal failures, and the future of the band. For Agnetha, who already dreaded it, the glare of the spotlight was such that one could not privately grieve. Every expression, every interview, every lyric was dissected for hidden meaning. Fans demanded answers, and the media demanded drama. The divorce became not only a personal loss, but a public spectacle. Firstly, Bjorn and Agnetha didn't let up on the reality of a very bitter divorce for the sake of ABBA. They performed together, recorded together, and held together. But there was something amiss. The smiles were tighter, the glances a little colder, and the tension was quite palpable. Even their bandmates, Benny Andersson and Annie Fried Lyngstad, felt the strain. The fallout of Bjorn and Agnetha's divorce didn't confine itself to these two. Its ripples were felt throughout the group. Yet out of heartbreak came one of ABBA's most haunting songs, born from Bjorn's darkest night. The Winner Takes It All. Few songs in ABBA's catalog carry the weight and raw emotion of The Winner Takes It All. To fans, it is one of the group's most powerful ballads, but behind the scenes, it was born out of real heartbreak. The story of its creation is deeply tied to Bjorn Ulvaeus and Agnetha Fältskog's unraveling marriage, and to this day, it remains one of the most personal and haunting songs in pop history. The inspiration struck in the summer of 1979, during a time when Bjorn and Agnetha's divorce was all but finalized. Bjorn and his songwriting partner, Benny Andersson, had retreated to Vigsö Island in the Swedish archipelago, a quiet place where they could write away from the chaos of fame. Bjorn carried with him not just musical ideas, but the storm of emotions that came from leaving a woman he once loved deeply. Sadness, guilt, anger, and regret were swirling inside him, and music was the only way he knew how to process it all. The whole thing started not as a finished song idea, but rather little sketches that Benny and Bjorn had saved, fragments they could piece together. Initially, it took form as a very up-tempo song with a rigid structure, but almost immediately they realized it just didn't work. The brilliant arrangement clashed with the pain Bjorn was trying to capture, so they stripped it back and started over. Now, Benny suggested making it sound like a French chanson, with a descending piano line that carried the feeling of melancholy and confession. Like that, so The Winner Takes It All started to assume its actual form. In one hysterical night, Bjorn poured himself into the lyrics. He would later admit that he drank a lot when writing the song, with whiskey pretty much enabling his emotional outpourings. Within hours, he wrote lines matching the desolation of his divorce, just pouring out the words. Even though he would insist in future interviews that the song wasn't about his split from Agnetha literally, the influence was too obvious. The lyrics spoke about endings, losses, one leaving while the other just stood there broken. It made heartbreak universal, but very personal in reality. She hadn't been able to keep her tears in check when she first read those lyrics. They weren't just words. That was her life painstakingly written, whether Bjorn admitted to that or not. In any event, the thought of performing it was a painful experience. However, she also understood that her voice could bring full weight to the song. She would sing, and by so doing, she would turn it into something much more than a private confession. The performance made it rawer than could have been delivered by anyone else. That recording session remains one of the most memorable in ABBA's history. Agnetha's voice seemed to mix resignation, heartbreak, and strength so much that every note sounded torn out of her own soul. Listeners across the world could feel the authenticity, as if they were watching a personal tragedy unfold in real time. For many, The Winner Takes It All became the ultimate breakup song, the one anthem for all who had ever loved and lost. Yet, the decision to have Agnetha perform it was controversial, even within ABBA's circle. Some wondered if it was cruel, forcing her to relive her pain night after night on stage. Bjorn defended the choice, saying that her emotional clarity was exactly what the song needed. Whether intentional or subconscious, the result was undeniable. Her voice immortalized their heartbreak, ensuring the song's place in music history. But why did Bjorn make Agnetha, the very woman he was leaving, carry such a heavy song? Fame, objectification, and Agnetha's struggles. For all the adoration that came with ABBA's worldwide fame, there was also a darker side, one that cut especially deep for Agnetha Fältskog. While she was celebrated for her voice and stage presence, the public and the press often reduced her to her appearance. Instead of being asked about her artistry, she was objectified, turned into a spectacle rather than a respected musician. The recent documentary, ABBA Against All Odds, brought these moments back into the light, showing just how cruel and demeaning it could be. One interview clip from the late 1970s remains particularly striking. A journalist, instead of discussing music, bluntly asked Agnetha if she was the proud owner of an award, naming her the woman with the sexiest bottom. It was a moment that summed up how the media chose to view her, not as a singer who carried some of ABBA's most emotionally powerful performances, but as a body part to be scrutinized. Author Germaine Greer, reflecting on this in the documentary, called it unsurprising but deeply unworthy, while ABBA's own costume designer, Ing-Marie Halling, admitted that being talked about in such terms stripped Agnetha of her dignity. It was not just agonizing for Agnetha, it was grueling as well. She confessed in the documentary that the sight of fame overwhelmed her in its entirety. The band had gone off touring Australia in 1977. At that time, the fans were bordering on hysteria-crazed seeming. They screamed and followed and shoved their way through every public movement. It might have caused some thrill at first, but as she later stated, after a while, it's not funny anymore. The attention gave her the feeling of being stripped naked and unsafe. What the public did not see was that, behind her bright smile while performing, she was facing increasing anxiety within her. To mix it a bit, Agnetha was also amidst a very difficult balancing act: to be a living legend and mother. Bjorn and Agnetha had 2 young children, Linda and Peter, and the pressure of being away from them while on tour was getting to Agnetha. It's hard work, and you always get back to bed conscious that she wants me and ABBA wants me, and it's very hard to do it all. Bjorn himself admitted how heartbreaking it was to come home from long tours and realize his daughter didn't even recognize him. For a young mother like Agnetha, that was devastating. Situations like these were what made a perfect storm. It made her feel trapped between 2 worlds: road life demanding her attention, while her heartstrings tugged every time she left the children behind. Fame, which was once a dream, was beginning to feel much more like a prison. With one world sucking away her strength while the other called for her presence, she sank deeper into isolation, worry, and emotional fatigue. Life took its toll as the years went by. Friends and colleagues remarked how Agnetha seemed increasingly troubled. Her eyes showed fears even with the hard-won occasion of joy. But instead of fear, outside influences developed into the appearance of night terrors, powerful dreams that brought back the vivid memories of her very real fear of losing her family. The more she felt the stare of the public upon her, the more she wished for safety and peace. Instead of an expression of concern and support, the media hurled the limelight even harder toward her looks, relationships, and alleged weaknesses. These pressures fed Agnetha's deepest fears, and soon, paranoia and anxiety began to consume her life. A love eaten by fear and distance. As ABBA's fame soared, the private lives of its members grew increasingly strained. For Bjorn Ulvaeus and Agnetha Fältskog, the illusion of stability crumbled as fear and distance crept into their marriage. What began as a passionate union built on music and mutual ambition became a fragile partnership strained by insecurities, anxieties, and emotional withdrawal. The more the world adored them as a couple, the less they could hold themselves together in private. Agnetha's struggles with anxiety and fear intensified as ABBA's global fame reached its peak. What might have started as the typical worries of a young wife and mother soon grew into something much darker. She became convinced that disaster lurked around every corner, obsessed with the possibility of stalkers, accidents, and betrayal. She feared plane crashes when the band toured, kidnappings that might harm her children, and infidelity that could destroy what little intimacy remained in her marriage. These thoughts weren't fleeting. They consumed her daily life and filled her with a sense of dread that never seemed to let go. Bjorn made many attempts to provide comfort in all her fears, but after a certain period of time, the constant worries overwhelmed him. His personality was all likeness to be practical and have control, while beyond this side of the view existed a side of his desire for order within the spiraling fears of her. What might have seemed as dissimilar small differences in temperament hardened themselves into a painful divide. For Agnetha, Bjorn's emotional detachment felt much like an abandonment. With Bjorn bursting into her desperate need, reassurance came off like a stifling act. And because he found it easiest to withdraw from her, she grew more desperate for that very thing he stiffened up against. Their home life revealed this widening gap, as it had, in a sense, begun to bleed into their music. The warm and passionate tunes gave way to melancholy refrains in places they had once pulsed. The lyrics Bjorn wrote were now becoming visible as mirrors to that dissolution and framed relationships within battle contexts, with one party's defeat awaiting the inevitable. Some fans would be left to wonder later on whether the increased melancholy in ABBA's later catalog was just part of the process of evolution as an artist, or whether this was its echo in the art of the couple. Rumors of potential infidelities began to abound, and while speculation was never confirmed, whispers insinuated that Bjorn, disillusioned and starved for affection, may have pursued affection beyond his marriage. For Agnetha, even such suspicion was disastrous. Already ridden with paranoia and anxiety, the thought of her husband being unfaithful pushed her nearer into despair. Rumor or not, the trust was already broken. Their once fiery relationship had devolved into nothing more than hollow performance, a sham they had to maintain for the sake of the band. And it was not just their marriage that suffered. The entire group started to feel the pinch. Bjorn's tensions with Agnetha, exacerbated by similar tensions between Benny Andersson and Anni-Frid Lyngstad, cast a damp shadow over the work of ABBA. Their rehearsal sessions became even colder, filled with unspoken words and unresolved anger. That bright, infectious energy, which had propelled them to the top of the hit lists, changed into darker, moodier music that reflected their private pain. Everything that had united them with that music began to illustrate their disunity. Cracks having appeared in their personal relationship, it was becoming increasingly difficult to keep up the image that ABBA was a joyful, harmonious group. The costumes sparkled and the melodies soared, but both fans and critics had noticed something different. The Winner Takes It All sounded not so much like a song, but like a confession, like diary entries set to melody. And it was wonderful for fans because of all that emotional depth, but it came at a terrible price for the band. The cracks in their marriage spread to the band itself, darkening ABBA's music and sealing its fate. Life after ABBA. When ABBA officially stepped away from the spotlight in the early 1980s, the group left behind not only a legacy of glittering hits, but also a trail of personal wreckage. For Bjorn Ulvaeus and Agnetha Fältskog, the years after the band dissolved marked the beginning of two very different journeys. While one rebuilt life with stability and creative triumphs, the other descended into heartbreak, tragedy, and isolation. For Agnetha, the post-ABBA years were fraught with pain. Already fragile during the band's final years, she found the end of her marriage and the group's breakup almost unbearable. Fame, which had once seemed like a golden ticket, became a prison. Without the structure of ABBA, she was left alone with her insecurities, fears, and unresolved grief. She struggled with the weight of single motherhood while navigating a world that still demanded perfection from her. Public interest in her private life didn't fade. It intensified. Instead of celebrating her artistry, the media dissected her relationships, her mental health, and even her appearance. She would counter-empower her attempts at finding love. Through the years, Agnetha engaged with various men, but none afforded her the comfort or stability she so desired. One was an ice hockey star, another was a fashion designer, and most controversially, there was her psychiatrist, Håkan Lundberg, during her attempt to save her marriage. Her next relationship was with Stockholm detective Thorbjörn Bränder, who was assigned to protect her after threats against her children by kidnappers. Each of these relationships spoke of her vulnerability, her need for protection, and her desire for security, but none stood the test of time. Eventually, even her marriage to surgeon Thomas Sonnenfeld fell apart, a further awakening of her fantasy about securing the stability she desired. Her personal tragedies deepened the heartache. In the 1990s, within a year, Agnetha suffered the loss of both parents. Her mother took her own life, and hardly had a month passed when her father followed. These losses shook her to her very core, casting further darkness upon her existing dread of separation and loss. Given her extreme distrust of the world by then, she chose to retreat even deeper into herself, remaining withdrawn. In sharp contrast, Bjorn's life after ABBA was relatively much less turbulent. He wed music journalist Lena Kellerhör exactly a year after his divorce from Agnetha. Both had kindred spirits in each other, and emotional strength and such powers kept their marriage unchanged for years. Unlike the tumultuous ways of his life with Agnetha, Bjorn's living with Lena would provide the grounding as well as peace that seemed so necessary to him. Creatively, too, Bjorn thrived. He and Benny Andersson made an almost seamless transition into new projects that proved their talents extended much beyond ABBA's pop formula, now working on the stage musical Chess, which achieved international success and later became such important players in the birth of Mamma Mia, now the world's theater phenomenon, which introduced ABBA's music to an entirely new generation. When the stage musical evolved into blockbuster films, the legacy of Bjorn expanded even further. His ability to adapt and reinvent was such that his career has never known stagnation, even as ABBA itself lay dormant for decades. You could not have drawn a wider contrast between the two ex-spouses. Bjorn, on the one hand, looks happy, contented, and ever creative. Contrastingly, Agnetha seems to experience the depths of ambiguity through the shadows of grief, loneliness, and distrust from the outside world. The same conflicting traits that rubbed them off each other during their marriage, his brain and her heart, have shaped their divergent courses after ABBA. While it was easy for him to rub away the ashes of yesterday since he was resilient, she continued to struggle with life away from the spotlight since she was more fragile. Even after the band's end, one question haunted fans: could ABBA ever reunite? The legacy and a final return. For years, ABBA seemed frozen in time. After their official split in the early 1980s, the band members moved on with their lives, each carrying their own triumphs and wounds. Fans clung to the music, but the hope of seeing them together again grew fainter with every passing decade. And yet, despite their absence, ABBA's legacy never weakened. The songs lived on, not just as nostalgia, but as cultural touchstones that resonated across generations. In the 1990s, their influence experienced a revival through the stage musical Mamma Mia, and later, the hit film adaptations. Suddenly, new audiences who hadn't even been alive during ABBA's peak were dancing to Dancing Queen and weeping to The Winner Takes It All. Their story, intertwined with heartbreak and resilience, became part of the emotional DNA of the music. Bjorn and Benny's continued involvement in these projects ensured the songs were preserved with the same emotional depth they had always carried. It was proof that ABBA's music was timeless, even if the band itself seemed lost to history. But the questions continued behind the curtains. Would the four ever stand on a stage together again? For years, the answer seemed to be no. Often, Bjorn and Benny dismissed the idea, hinting at a greater need to leave the ABBA years behind. Agnetha still seemed unlikely to want a reunion, being quite frail and withdrawn from public life. Her old wounds of anxiety, broken relationships, and media invasion were still open. The fans accepted the silence, thinking the book on ABBA had already been closed. Then suddenly, the things that were not supposed to happen, happened. Voyage was announced in 2021 as ABBA's first studio album in 40 years, alongside a bold virtual concert in London. The announcement stunned the world. For decades, Bjorn, Agnetha, Benny, and Annie Frid maintained ABBA would never reunite. Yet here they were again, stepping boldly into the spotlight with new music and a groundbreaking project fusing digital avatars with live musicians. It felt like the past was coming alive, and everything in between memory and the present was waning. The premiere of Voyage 2022 was indeed one of the most radical and emotional moments in the history of pop music. The four members walked down the red carpet together for the first time after decades, side by side. All the fans, most of whom had ABBA's melodies carried in their hearts for a lifetime, erupted with joy and tears. It made the event very emotional seeing Bjorn and Agnetha again, not as the fairy tale couple everyone talked about in the past, but as two people forever bound by history, music, and a complicated love that once defined them. The very essence of their life's journey was that of the album itself. Memories, time, and reconciliation defined the themes around which the songs revolved. It was not about setting the past ablaze, but it was about honoring the past. Bjorn, even admitting that getting back into the creative process with the former bandmates was both emotional and cathartic, added Agnetha, "He too found a way back into her music, however, with discords that may never completely leave." For the fans, it was like finding a treasure again to hear new ABBA songs during the 21st century. ABBA's music may sound bright, but behind the melodies lie heartbreak, sacrifice, and truth. Bjorn's revelations about Agnetha remind us that even the most magical love stories can hide devastating realities. What do you think of the truth he shared? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and watch the next video on your screen for more untold stories.